Hey guys, what's up? I'm Nicole and this is my channel. Now you guys haven't seen my face in a while, so let's just jump right on into it. We're moved. Officially. As in, we're comfortable, we've been here for a minute, and so we pretty much like it. It's pretty cool here. But now that we're comfortable, we're situated, now I kind of want to explain to you guys why we had to move in the first place. So, it all started last year. Okay, so we lived in the apartment, we lived in our previous apartment at least 15 years, maybe 14. A really long time. Basically my entire elementary and high school experience, we lived in that building. And, we had the same landlord, no problems, But last year, the landlord opened up the back of the building. This is going to be a little bit hard to explain, so I'm just going to show it to you guys somewhere on the screen. He opened up the back of the building, which had been infested with roaches and mice because it's been closed for over 25 years, way before he even bought the building. And so he opens it back up. We get like an infestation of roaches and mice from that section of the building. They just come right over to ours. And he hires the worst workers in the world to work on the building. Now, I'm not saying they're not good at their job, because they probably were, and it did look nice when I looked at it. But they were kind of rude. And by rude, I mean, there are several parking spots in the back of the building. And there were 2 people in the building at the time. It was just our apartment and the apartment above ours. And each apartment had a car. Well, the workers would come and they'd take up all the spots. And I mean, that's okay because it's a parking lot right next door and the neighbor could park there. But I'm not really allowed to park there because I couldn't pay for those spots, And we had to talk about it, and they said they'd give me a spot, and they did, but then they locked me in every single time. And at that time, I was currently in college, so it was a huge issue because I couldn't get out to go to school, and when I did get out to come home, I couldn't park anywhere. If you're wondering what that noise is, it is my fan. It's kind of hot up here in my room, which I will show you guys in my next video, which will be the apartment tour. It's kind of hot up here. It shifts around like, sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's cold. And so I have my fan on and the window open, so you might hear some cars passing by, or you're going to always hear the fan that's on. So, stealing the parking spots weren't really the entire thing that they did. They also crowded the backyard with family members. I'm not sure if they lived in a neighborhood, but they crowded the backyard with brothers, cousins, sisters. They talked outside all night long until they left. And it was kind of annoying. And then let's also not forget that they left their trash behind, because when they'd bring their family members over, they'd bring food. And the most common food they would eat is Popeyes. And I don't have a problem with Popeyes, but I have a problem with them leaving half-eaten food out in the back. Because if you remember, I mentioned that the back was infested with mice. And so leaving the food out there just drew in more mice, which ended up coming into our section of the apartment. So the neighbors upstairs and us both experienced an increase in the amount of mice we were capturing on the trays they gave us. Although every time we told the landlord would say we don't have mice, despite the pictures that we had that obviously showed that we did. But yeah, we managed to claw our way through that, and we thought everything was fine. Maybe there were little clues here and there that the landlord was going to sell the building, but he never came outright and said it until the deal was done. He had crossed his T's and dotted his I's, and the building was gone. He texted us, he let us know that inspectors were coming to inspect the building. We thought, okay, it's not going to be that big of an issue. He said the person he sold it to was pretty nice. So the inspectors came, 2 guys. They were pretty cool, I guess. They looked over the building, said everything was fine, and then they left. So about a few days later, this is early February, a few days later, we get a letter. Not in the mail, we get it in the backyard on our back porch. Because for some reason they didn't want to send us a letter, I guess, or speak to us because they knew we were there because my car was parked in the lot. But they left us a note in the backyard that told us who to send the rent to and that the landlord would not be dealing with us. It was going to be a property manager. And I've heard of landlords doing that, and I was like, okay, that's fine. Until the property manager ended up being Remax, and they did some strange things. And Remax is kind of the people who are giving us the problem. It's not the landlord per se. We never really even got to meet the new landlord. Like, we never even saw or heard from the new landlord at all. We mostly just heard from Remax. And they're the ones we ended up having a problem with. And it started kind of late February, pretty sure. The first thing they did was they sent someone to fix the sink because we'd been complaining for a long time to the previous landlord that the sink was leaking and nothing we did would fix it. So the guy went in, he fixed it, he had a conversation with us, he looked around, even though we didn't notice he looked around. And then the next day, my mom got a phone call. In this phone call, they told her, or rather they asked her, how many people were living in the apartment. And my mom said 2. Me and her, obviously. Been that way for almost 15 years. And they said that it's a 1-bedroom apartment. And it's illegal to have 2 people living in a 1-bedroom apartment. Which, by the way, I looked it up. It's not illegal, but landlords can pick and choose whether they want that or not. Okay, so the issue then became that they would have to raise the rent. Because the guy apparently who came to fix the sink told them that there were 2 beds in 2 different rooms, which meant that they could fit 2 bedrooms in the apartment, which means the rent that we were paying would be raised up $200, which I guess would be fine until she also said they don't allow pets. And we said we've had the pet for about 7, 8 years. You can't just tell us to get rid of them. And she was like, fine, well, we can raise your rent up another $100. And we were like, we can't afford that. Obviously we can't. And the fact that they don't allow pets is kind of weird because I looked it up when I was searching for the apartment up for rent. And they were advertising that the apartment was allowing small and medium-sized dogs. So if you're not allowed to have a dog, why would you advertise that you're allowing for dogs? But we went with it. We were trying to figure out how to get the money up, and then my mom told them that we couldn't do it. And they said that we would have to vacate the premises. Now, that later came with a letter in the mail, 2 letters in the mail, telling us that we had to vacate the premises. But there was a catch. Although we had paid the rent already for March, because we got the eviction letters in March, after we paid the rent, we had a lease, a month-by-month lease, so we already paid for March, so they weren't going to kick us out in March. They wanted us to leave in April, but they wanted us to pay April's rent. So basically, they wanted us out in April. Didn't matter when we left in April, but they wanted the full month's rent of April. Now, not the rent that we've been paying for about 14, 15 years. They wanted the raised rent, which would be approximately $900-something. And we couldn't afford that, obviously, because we can't afford to find a new apartment and pay the rent. So we did a little digging. We tried to find a new place to go. A lot of people were not willing to take us in because, 1, the virus, 2, my mom and me couldn't afford to have the electric in a separate name. It had to be included, and a lot of buildings didn't do that except for low-income buildings, which were in a totally different neighborhood. We tried everything, nobody would help us, and then finally we found an apartment. The landlord of this apartment was pretty cool. He was pretty straightforward. the rent that we pay here is actually cheaper than what we paid at the last apartment. And the only difference though is that he couldn't get the electric included, so we do have to pay it ourselves. But it's not actually as high as it would have been if we chose a different apartment because of the area. But now that we've moved, there are also other issues that we chose to vacate the premises instead of paying the raised rent. Not just because the raised rent was like $900 something and we were paying, what, $500? Less than $500? I'll put it somewhere on here. We were paying less than that, and they wanted to raise it all the way up to $900, which, by the way, the apartment was not worth it, and they were refusing to fix anything in it to begin with. Now, here is everything that was wrong with the apartment. So the first thing I want to talk about is the infestations, because it did not go away. It only got worse. Okay, the first problem we had was roaches. And we'd had a little bit of the issue over the last 10 years maybe, but it became a bigger issue once they opened up the back of the apartment building, because it just kind of like swarmed into our apartment and the neighbors upstairs. And if you've never lived with roaches, yeah, you don't want to. It's not something you want. And the people they hired to come in and spray never actually sprayed. They sprayed in one section and then left. And we didn't see them for like another month or two. It didn't do anything. It didn't make them go away. It didn't get rid of the situation. It didn't make anything better. And on top of the roaches, we had mice. And by mice, I mean lots of mice. I would get sticky trays and I'd have about 10 to 15 mice on them at once. And I'd show them to the landlord, and I'd show them to the property managers, and they'd say, "What did you do?" We didn't do anything. We didn't have the issue until they opened up the back apartments. And then the last one was an issue we recently just had, like it happened in the last year or so, and that's termites. The floor, underneath the floor is wood, and the wood is completely damaged. It was just rotted to the core, basically. And the previous landlord wouldn't replace it. He did try, I will admit. He hired someone who went in and dug up the floor, put decent wood down. I wouldn't say it was good wood because it was rotted still, but he put new decent wood down, and the floor was stable for a few more months before it started caving in again. Hold on, take a note of the guy I just said fixed the floor, because he comes into this later as well. The new landlords also didn't really come around. I told you it's the property managers, and they didn't really fix the floor either. They refused to. And they refused to admit that we had an infestation of termites. They said we didn't have termites, that we were imagining things, although the wood underneath the floor was being eaten apart by termites. Even the guy who fixed the floor said there were termites, that we had a problem and it needed to be fixed. But nobody paid for anything to be fixed, nobody said anything, and it was like it never existed. Okay, the next issue I'm going to start with is the failings of the apartment. The first failing being the floor. I already mentioned before that the floor started to fall in, and not just in one section, but in multiple sections of different rooms. The floor just started to cave, and it's not something that you notice when you look at it. It's something that you notice when you step on it, because the floor would automatically sink down like you're about to fall through it. And if you've never lived in an apartment like that, it's not a healthy experience. The next little thing I would say, or rather big thing depending on what you think about it, are the locks. Okay, so we had the same locks for a lot of years, and we wanted to replace them, but the landlord said no. The guy I told you fixed our floor stole our keys to the building. Now, we had no proof he stole it, but we knew that it was him because he was the only person left alone in the room with the keys in the first place. And our previous landlord refused to admit that he stole them to begin with. He didn't know the guy, he'd never met him, but he used them multiple times and said there's no way he would have stolen the keys. And several weeks later, we find the keys in the hallway, which we never left them in the hallway. We don't leave them like that. This left us to believe that he had made a copy of the keys, which meant that our locks were not safe. We asked if we could replace them. They said no. And then when he sold the building, the property managers said no as well. But they wanted to replace them on their own a couple days later. Now, because of all the fighting we'd had with them and all the issues we currently had, we were a little bit skeptic of what they were going to do. So we were there when they came to change the locks. And basically, they took the locks off. So we had about 3 locks on the front door and 2 locks on the back door. The guy who was hired to change the locks removed 2 locks on the front door, replaced the last lock, and left that. Then he went to the back, stripped the lock on the doorknob, and replaced the top lock with a universal lock. So the same key opened the front and the back door. But there was only 1 lock. Now, this might not be an issue for other neighborhoods, but our neighborhood is a really bad neighborhood. Which is why we love the fact that there were deadbolts on the doors, but the locks they replaced them with were not deadbolts, and they refused to put another deadbolt on. And it didn't escape our notice that people in the parking lot next door, who usually play basketball and stuff, had noticed that the locks were being changed too. Because they were watching the whole time the guy was drilling holes into the door. We asked them politely if they would change them to deadbolts because of the neighborhood, and they said no, repeatedly. With only having 1 lock on the front door, and it's not a deadbolt, we didn't really feel safe knowing that the kids next door, or anyone really, could open the door and come into the hallway and probably kick down our door. So we told the property managers about this, and they said there was nothing they could do. That it's not an issue, and that we should either move or just basically be quiet about it. And it's not something that we just had an issue with either, because as it turns out there were other people in other buildings that Remax was the property manager of that was doing the very same thing. If we had reported the apartment to the health department, I guarantee they would have closed the entire building down because it was not safe, period. Didn't matter how nice they made the top floor look, the building was not safe. It had an infestation of termites, mice, roaches. The floors were falling in, holes in the walls, leaks. It wasn't safe. But instead of going through the issues of fighting with them and going to court, we just moved. And I can't say that I regret it, because yes, I did spend my entire childhood there, and I'm going to miss living there for some reason. A little part of me is, at least. This place is pretty nice. It's a little smaller, I will admit. It's a little smaller than the previous apartment. But in some ways, it's actually bigger. Like, my room here is bigger than my room there. Our kitchen over there is bigger than the one here, but we didn't really use anything in that kitchen to begin with. So, that's the story of why we moved. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. If you've had a run-in with Remax, let me know how that went. Also, don't forget to find me on Instagram. I'm going to put it right here. It's going to be at the end of the video. It's probably at the beginning of the video. Also, hit that like button and subscribe to my channel so that you can be here when I give you guys the tour to our new apartment. Anyway, it's been a while since I've been on YouTube. I'm super excited about the next few months. I have some videos planned out. I also want to talk to you guys later about everything that's gone on during quarantine and all the cool things that have popped up because of it. So, that's all I have to say to you guys. Thank you guys for watching, and please stay safe out there.